Okay, I'm sideways for chapter 2. 1952. After Ma left, over the next few weeks, Kia's oldest brother and 2 sisters drifted away too, as if by example. They had endured Pa's red-faced rages, which started as shouts and then escalated into fist slugs or backhanded punches, until one by one they disappeared. They were nearly grown anyway, and later, just as she forgot their ages, she couldn't remember their real names, only that they were called Missy, Murph, and Mandy. On her porch mattress, Kia found a small pile of socks left by her sisters. On the morning when Jody was the only sibling left, Kia awakened to the clatter-clank and hot grease of breakfast. She dashed into the kitchen, thinking Ma was home frying corn fritters or hoe cakes, but it was Jody, standing at the wood stove, stirring grits. She smiled to hide the letdown, and he pat the top of her head, gently shushing her to be quiet, and if they didn't wake Pa, they could eat alone. Jody didn't know how to make biscuits, and there wasn't any bacon, so he cooked grits and scrambled eggs and lard, and they sat down together, silently exchanging glances and smiles. They washed their dishes fast. They ran out the door toward the marsh, he in the lead, but just then Pa shouted and hobbled toward them, impossibly lean. His frame seemed to flop about from poor gravity, his molars yellow as an old dog's teeth. Kia looked up at Jody. "We can run, hide in the mossy place. It's okay. It'll be okay," he said. Later, near sunset, Jody found Kia on the beach staring at the sea. As he stepped up beside her, she didn't look at him, but kept her eyes on the rolling waves. Still she knew by the way he spoke that Pa had slugged his face. "I have to go, Kia. Can't live here no longer." She almost turned to him, but didn't. Wanted to beg him not to leave her alone with Pa, but the words all jammed up. "When you're old enough, you'll understand," he said. Kia wanted to holler out that she may be young, but she wasn't stupid. She knew Pa was the reason they left. All she wondered was why no one took her with them. She'd thought of leaving too, but had nowhere to go and no bus money. "Kia, you be careful, here? If anybody comes, don't go in the house. They can get you there. Run deep in the marsh, hide in the bushes. Always cover your tracks. I learned you how. Taught you how. I learned you how. And you can hide from Pa, too." When she still didn't speak, he said goodbye and strode across the beach to the woods. Just before he stepped into the trees, she finally turned and watched him walk away. "This little piggy stayed home," she said to the waves. Breaking her freeze, she ran to the shack, shouted his name down the hall, but Jody's things were already gone, his floor bed stripped bare. She sank onto his mattress, watching the last of that day slide down the wall. Light lingered after the sun, as it does, some of it pooling in the room, so that for a brief moment the lumpy beds and piles of old clothes took on more shape and color than the trees outside. A gnawing hunger, such a mundane thing, surprised her. She walked to the kitchen and stood at the door. All her life the room had been warmed from baked bread, boiling butter beans, or bubbling fish stew. Now it was stale, quiet, and dark. "Who's going to cook?" she asked out loud. Could have asked, "Who's going to dance?" She lit a candle and poked at hot ashes in the wood stove, adding kindling. Pumped the bellows till a flame caught, then more wood. The Frigidaire served as a cupboard because no electricity came near the shack. To keep the mold at bay, the door was propped open with the fly swatter. Still, greenish-black veins of mildew grew in every crevice. Getting out leftovers, she said, "I'll tump the grits in lard, warm 'em up." Oh my gosh. "I'll tump the grits in lard, warm 'em up," which she did and ate from the pot, looking through the window for Pa, but he didn't come. When light from the quarter moon finally touched the shack, she crawled into her porch bed, a lumpy mattress on the floor with real sheets covered in little blue roses that Ma had got at a yard sale, alone at night for the first time in her life. At first, every few minutes, she sat up and peered through the screen, listening for footsteps in the woods. She knew the shapes of all the trees. Still some seemed to dart here and there, moving with the moon. For a while she was so stiff she couldn't swallow, but on cue, the familiar songs of tree frogs and katydids filled the night. It's a cicada, katydid. More comforting than 3 blind mice with a carving knife. The darkness held an odor of sweetness, the earthy breath of frogs and salamanders who'd made it through one more stinky hot day. The marsh snuggled in closer with a low fog, and she slept. For 3 days, Pa didn't come, and Kia boiled turnip greens from Ma's garden for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She walked out to the chicken coop for eggs, but found it bare. Not a chicken or egg anywhere. Chicken shits. You're just a bunch of chicken shits. She'd been meaning to tend them since Ma left, but hadn't done much of anything. Now they'd escaped as a motley flock, clucking far in the trees beyond. She'd have to scatter grits, see if she could keep them close. On the evening of the 4th day, Pa showed up with a bottle and sprawled across his bed. Walking into the kitchen the next morning, he hollered, "Where's everybody got to?" "I don't know," she said, not looking at him. "You don't know much a cur dog. You don't know much as a cur dog. Useless as tits on a boar hog," he said. Not funny. Kia slipped quietly out the porch door, but walking along the beach, searching for mussels, she smelled smoke and looked up to see a plume rising from the direction of the shack. Running as fast as she could, she broke through the trees and saw a bonfire blazing in the yard. Pa was throwing Ma's paintings, dresses, and books onto the flames. She thought her mom was cooking or something. "No!" Kia screamed. He didn't look at her, but threw the old battery-operated radio into the fire. Her face and arms burned as she reached toward the paintings, but the heat pushed her back. She rushed to the shack to block Pa's return for more, locking eyes with him. Pa raised his backhand toward Kia, but she stood her ground. Suddenly he turned and limp-stepped toward his boat. Kia sank onto the brick and boards, watching Ma's watercolors of the marsh smolder into ash. She sat until sunset, until all the buttons glowed as embers, and the memories of dancing the jitterbug with Ma melted into the flames. Over the next few days, Kia learned from the mistakes of the others, and perhaps more from the minnows, how to live with him. Over the next few days, Kia learned from the mistakes of the others, and perhaps more from the minnows, how to live with him. Just keep out of the way, don't let him see you, dart from sunspots to shadows, up and out of the house before he rose, and she lived in the woods and water, then padded into the house to sleep in her bed on the porch, as close to the marsh as she could. I think I have to stop here because it's really long. 8 minutes.